So with the tuition fee review coming up, why do you think it's so important that we have a review?
One way or another, for certain groups of two fronts really, I suppose, spring to mind. For certain groups of students, the current system can be perceived as not working. There are floods, a huge increase of people from lower socio-economic groups coming to university. The idea of having a range of course costs up to 9,250 hasn't really materialised, and the 9,000 fees came in 2012, in which time there's only been the increase of 250, so that hasn't actually reflected other costs to institutions which have also gone up. So it does need reviewing, both the amounts involved and also the processes behind how money is allocated to students and institutions.
Do you think they made a mistake pushing it up to such a high cost?
It's almost another way it needs to be looked at it, insofar as the courses cost what they cost to run. The government in the background took away funding it was previously giving to institutions, leaving, so prior to 2012, leaving about 3,000-ish. The student would contribute while the government gave the rest. What the government really did was took away that money that they were giving to the universities and said, instead, charge the student that. So, in a way, fees had to go up to offset the fact the government wasn't paying what they were previously paying. The question then would be, should the government be making that contribution themselves, or should it be the students paying for it?
So the review could lead to them cutting fees. Do you think that will benefit students, or is it going to just make it worse then?
I think one of the things that might be in the mix would be, in a way, to revisit what they originally planned with the 9,000 fees, which was to have 9,000 as a maximum, but then they hoped there would be some which would be less than that. So there might be courses offered in a different style or in a different manner, which would mean some might only cost 8,000 or 7,000 or 6,000. And that, by and large, just didn't happen. Everyone charged the full amount. So, yes, potentially it would be a good idea to have different courses at different prices, but what structures those prices would need to be important. Because last time they tried it, it just didn't work, and everyone charged the full amount. Mm-hmm. So the idea of having a range of prices across the market just didn't materialise. So potentially, a good idea is got to actually work this time.
Yeah, so the use of variable fees could just be an unfair process, do you think? Especially for an arts university.
It could. Well, it would depend on how. Again, it would depend on how they're structured and what the rules are, which dictate why that course could be price X and that course has to be price Y. It would very much depend on what that structure would be. I mean, a lot of students could quite fairly ask the question of, well, I'm on a writing course and I have a desk. My friend's on a studio-based course which has various bits of kit, tools, technicians, etc., etc. Why are we paying the same amount? So there could be, the notion of having maybe banding for different sorts of cost courses, if you like. So the higher cost courses maybe are allowed to charge more, whereas lower cost courses aren't. There would at least be a logic to that, and I think fairer students would see the logic behind that. Beyond that, though, there need to, like I say, be clear structure on why some courses are one price and not the other. So the idea is good, it just needs to be done the right way.
So with uni fees, they can be classed as actually just pointless debt because of the amount they are. Do you think there's a lack of education on uni debt? People don't actually understand.
Definitely, that comes back to that first point about how there hasn't been this huge jump in lower income students coming to university or students from other disadvantaged groups. The big thing around that, we feel, is a misunderstanding of what the situation is. People get hung up on the word debt, they get hung up on the figure 50,000 or whatever it might be that will appear on their student loan statements, without fully understanding what that impact is. The impact of actually is a contribution that comes out of your wages, you'll only repay over a certain threshold, etc., etc. And the current system actually isn't a bad stab at trying to make it like a graduate tax. So if you do a degree and you earn high, well, you'll pay your money back. If you don't do a degree, because you go to university, you won't make any payments because you haven't accessed the sector. It's almost a graduate tax, which I think a lot of people would see as maybe a fair route of going without it actually being a tax. So it's not a bad system. The trouble is a lot of people don't understand it, and especially maybe people who are very fearful of debt. And I've been a bit generalising here, but then the people maybe who are on lower incomes and things like that might be more fearful than others. And yeah, if we could do something, to, even if the names were changed and it wasn't a student loan and it wasn't a student debt, it was seen as some other wording was brought in there, that even that would have an effect on it.
Do you think a lot of the problems have come from the maintenance grant being scrapped, that is more than the actual fees of the courses?
Again, I think the biggest problem is the wording surrounding it. So people are seeing something that was free taken away and something that's replaced it, which they class as a debt. At the end of the day, students have got more money in their pocket for an academic year now than they did 3 years ago or 10 years ago. And a lot of students won't pay back a lot of what they owe. So in a way, you could almost retrospectively rename, you could 30 years time look back at the students' money that I had for university and rename stuff, so you didn't pay that back, so we'll call that a grant, and then this one you did pay back, so it is a loan. And actually the amount of money they get, which they don't repay, will probably still be sizable. So again, it's more down to the names things are given, because at the end of the day, yes, students have got more money in their pocket now for doing their course than they did, and lots of that won't actually be repaid. But yeah, tell people they're not going to get a grant, they immediately take that as a big negative.
And lastly, just do you think maybe then education into debt should be introduced in schools?
I think more broadly, aside from higher education and university funding, debt, money management, etc. should definitely be put in at schools. You know, what is a loan, what is a credit card, what is a bank account, all that real basic stuff. As a forerunner to then students come into the conversation about how they fund university, and again at that stage then hopefully words like debt and loan will be taken out and the process tweaked so people understand that actually I'm getting money here now to do this route of study, which I'll then start to repay once I'm earning, so if I access it I'll pay for it. The two things, yeah, that education prior to university and then education about how university funding works would definitely be beneficial, be completely.